Greetings, comrades. I am Admiral Andre, and here we are at the Kerbal Space Program Twitter feed. They released this message yesterday. I did want to make a video about this, but I thought I would put that off until today. So it's the August the 7th, it's August the 8th today. But at any rate, the exact date doesn't matter. The post here is about the 8th anniversary of KSP, which was on June the 24th, so it's anyway in the past already. But something like this should definitely be celebrated, because it's been 8 years now. I joined or started playing KSP in 2014, I think, so it's anyway been 5 years. So with that said, I am going to start a new career save today. I know it's not necessarily what many people want to see in terms of building new replicas and that sort of thing, but I have never done this on the channel, so I thought this is obviously something where there's still a gap. I'm playing in the background this fantastic orchestral tribute version of KSP's main theme by Emil Persson. I'll just link his SoundCloud and this page in the description. He does graciously allow us to use this music in videos, we just have to credit him. So with that said, comrades, let's go into the game and begin a new adventure with KSP, as has happened now for 8 years. Can you believe it? 0.7.3 was the first publicly released version. I think somewhere on my channel as well I did a comparison with what KSP used to look like, but it's already a few years old. I'm not sure if I used that particular version, but it was a very old one. So we've come a long way, and I think it's also important to reflect on that from time to time. So I'll see you in the game, comrades. Right, comrades, here we are. KSP as we know and love it. Now, a few notes about this particular install. This is a fresh install of KSP. We'll still see the various save games that I have when we go and look at that, because that's all backed up on Steam. I think that's how it works, but anyway. So this is without any of the visual mods that I like to use, but I've decided now I'm going to absolutely minimize the mods that I use, just because it saves me the frustration when the mods go out of date, and also if there's various issues and so on. Another thing that I'm doing is I am recording this still with Bandicam as I always do, but I'm doing it differently now. Instead of recording the game itself, I'm recording the screen, because it solves a few problems. One of them being the little delays that we get when we switch in and out of the VAB, and then there's a mismatch between the video and the audio. And also the other thing is, I found this very interesting thing when I tried experimenting with this yesterday. For some reason there's a tremendous slowdown in the frame rate when I record with Bandicam and I open any of the mod windows, and that is completely inexplicable to me, but it does not happen when I record the screen instead of the game. So with all of that said, let's just go to settings. Now a few things here. I'm using all of the basics, advanced tweakables. I'm also experimenting with using contract deadlines as dates. We'll see how that goes. I've never done that before, but I was curious about that. I've also turned off tidying the debris cluttering KSC, because we might want to place experiments near KSC and also other structures like labs and so on. So I don't want to have that happen automatically. The other thing is I've also turned the UI scale up just a little bit to 110%, because it does help a little bit to see everything and so on. Otherwise it does get really small to read all of the things. Anyway, that said, just have a look at graphics. This is basically the default stuff, except I did turn the texture quality to full res instead of half res. So other than that, I didn't mess with the ambient light boost or anything like that. We'll see if it's too dark, but without the mods it should be fine. And I guess that's it, so we'll accept. And then we'll go, and there's a little lag here also for some reason when you go out to the main menu. I don't know, it's been happening with recent versions, but it's no big deal. So, start game. And for this one, if I just say resume saved, we'll see all of the previous things here, so they are still here. It's obviously going to cause some problems with mods wherever that is relevant, but luckily the previous craft like the Saturn V and so on did not use mods. So start new, and this is going to be YouTube Career Org 2019. Just so I'm specific, so I know this is an important save to keep around. Career, obviously, and flag is always important. You're not a country if you don't have a flag. I'm sure many of you know what and whom I'm referring to. I always like to take the retro, and to me it's more like, again, if KSP was a serious kind of space program, which I kind of like to think about it in that way, then we need a nice badge like that, and that one works very nice also because of the transparent background. So there we go. Difficulty options, I always mess around with this. We'll keep the base level on normal because I want all of these figures on normal. Reputation, funds, I don't need to make that more difficult than it is because I'm not going to be taking every single contract that comes my way. Now, the next thing, re-entry heating, I want up to maximum because again it makes it slightly more difficult. I also want allow other launch sites, that's very important for me. I also want the entry purchase on research, so we basically fund the development of various parts from our subcontractors, but no crews respawn for obvious reasons. Then require signal control, signal for control, I will leave that off because we anyway have limited control then in the far side of a planet or moon, which is more accurate than having no control because obviously people would, and Kerbals also I assume, since they have a space program, they would program the probes to have certain minimum functionality when it's out of range. Plasma blackout is yes. Occlusion modifier in a vacuum is going to be 1, so basically we lose signal as soon as we pass behind an object. Then the occlusion modifier for an atmosphere I also turn up to 0.9, so it's a little bit more difficult for a signal to bounce then in the atmosphere. Part upgrades will be on. Kerbal G-force limits will be on, and I'm going to reduce their tolerance to about 0.61, more or less there. I found this works quite well. If you have, for example, a G-force of 9 for a few seconds, then they will tend to pass out, which is also how it should be, I think. Just so they're not supermen or super Kerbals, as it were. And we have to kind of focus on not pushing them too far. Then part G-force limits and part pressure limits, so no deep sea exploration with spacecraft parts, unfortunately. And no negative funds or science. Definitely want experience. I toyed with the idea of putting it on level up immediately because if you get experience, you obviously have access to your experience immediately. You don't have to go for a debrief first. But we can of course level up Kerbals in the lab, so I will try to do that. Just make it a bit more ceremonious in that sense, so we will leave this off. I'm not going to mess with the stage recovery or the toolbar control because those are two of the mods that I'm using. Of course the toolbar is necessary for the stage recovery. I'll get into the mods that I do use in a moment, so we'll leave that for now. Stock. Accept. Start. Now here is normally something I would cut out of the recording because this black screen desyncs the audio, but with the screen recording that should not happen. Right, so Gene Kerman, our old friend and comrade for 8 years, he welcomes us back as he's the flight director, but I am the administrator of the space agency or space program here. We're well acquainted, thank you very much. So let us begin with the mods. The mods are very few and very carefully curated, as it were. I want X-Science. We don't have to use this particular one, but something like this, because it helps us to keep track of when we need to do various experiments, which I will overlook, and I don't want that to happen. So this particular mod will of course remind me when specific experiments need to be run. That is not changing the essence of the game. It's just giving me extra quality of life, extra information. So I accept this one. But this is not strictly necessary. What I think is strictly necessary is Kerbal Alarm Clock. This is an absolutely essential mod. In my opinion, it should and probably will be added to the game in some form at some point, because we've already received the Delta V, and that is essential, but we still cannot plan our interplanetary trajectories without going to some external information source, unless you memorize the angles or you just plain experiment. So that's why it's essential. And of course it keeps track of your craft when they change SOI and other things like that. So this is a must. Then in association with that, you get the transfer window planner here, which is not as essential, but it gives you more varied and more accurate, I think, information for your transfer planning. So that works with the alarm clock, of course. Then stage recovery. Obviously this doesn't give us anything right now, but I think for a career game that is quite important. It is not essential again. That would just be an optional mod. But if it doesn't work one day and we get rid of it, it's not going to break the game, and it doesn't introduce any parts, so it's fine. It just helps us to get some funds back from spent rocket stages. So I think that is always welcome when we work with such a limited budget. Then this is a toolbar mod. This is one of the dependencies for stage recovery, and this is of course one of the problems with mods. They tend to multiply like rabbits. One day you want something, but then you find out you need 10 different dependencies and dependencies for your dependencies, and so on and so forth. But in this case I will allow it. I have to be very strict about this from now on. So as we always do when we start a career, before that actually we take a contract. Let us consider this is now the very first day of the new space program, seeing it with new eyes, as it were, in celebration of the 8-year anniversary. So we can role play a little bit. Now, the various, I don't know what we even have on this planet, countries or provinces or administrative divisions. I suppose it's really one planetary government because they have one planetary space program. But at any rate, the various entities have come together to create the funding for a space program, and they allotted us this land right here. This belongs to us. And they flattened it out. It was a little peninsula here. They flattened it out very nicely. And while they were doing that, they found that object right there, a monolith. It is a very curious thing, and we will obviously strive to find out more about that in the future. But that's sort of how I justify the whole thing, that it's there. They found it when they were smoothing out the terrain here one day. They are also leasing us that island right there with its disused airbase there. And they're also leasing us 2 different launch pads in the desert and of course up in the north, plus the airfield in the desert as well. Other than that, we should really try not to crash our rockets onto the land, except of course the ocean, which is not the land by definition, and our particular territories that we control. I suppose it comes almost from the videos that I did earlier today, where I said again I like borders. So this is a way of saying this is our territory, administered by me as the administrator. So again, we don't want to dump rocket stages onto the general population or damage their property, and that will give a bad reputation for the space program, which is one of the things we are striving for, the recognition and the reputation. So we have to just try to be mindful of that. Of course, it doesn't really matter, but as I said, I'm trying a little bit of a role play. Now, with all that babble out of the way, let's take our first contract. And I'm just going to have some tea, as I customarily do. Especially because I've been recording so much in the last 2 days. My voice is a bit worse for wear. Anyway, so we'll take the basic 2 contracts as we always do. Gather scientific data and launch the first vessel. We don't even need to look deeper into that. So here's where one of the desyncs would again happen. So welcome our old friend Werner von Kerman. He explains to us various details, but we are already familiar with everything. So now we get to the capsules. Of course, the Kerbals, as we know, they start with their manned program, or rather their crewed program, instead of an automated one, which is their way of doing things. We'll accept that. That is just their more brave and daring spirit that led to that point. For the initial various missions, I will take the Mercury kind of equivalent capsule. But I have also decided, I know many people who play career or stock KSP struggle with naming their craft. That is actually, for many people, the most difficult part. So I have gone ahead, and now I just have to find this thing. Somewhere here, there, just right next to the microphone actually, is a piece of paper on which I wrote many different names for historical space programs, such as, of course, Surveyor, Ranger, Mariner, Pioneer, and so on, because I'll still want to use those names, but of course in our own unique way. Then I just wrote down various other names, lots and lots of them, just to have at hand something when we need a name. I'll have it. Now, just like the Mercury capsule was basically what gave the name to the whole Mercury program, we have to pick a name for this capsule, and every time we launch this capsule we will call the mission by that name. So I have a list here, and I think the one that I want to use for this is Gladius. This will be the Gladius capsule, so by definition this will be Gladius 1 for the first mission. So that's our Mercury equivalent. And the reason I'm doing that is because they just call it the Mark 1 part. Of course, we want something more ceremonious than that. Now, you'll see another mod as well, Kerbal Engineer Redux, which we couldn't see before. The reason I added this, I did not have this when I did the live stream, and I decided it is actually an essential mod. You don't need it at the start of any kind of career or something. It's just when you try and build a space shuttle, the torque is an essential bit of information which is missing from our stock Delta V readout. You definitely want to be minimizing the torque, and you can then see by stage exactly how it's going to behave. So that is why I strongly want to have this installed. So we will not use it at the start. Maybe in this career we will never use it, but obviously in the sandbox I will be using that. But we'll just use the stock for now. So we will add, of course, we don't even need to add a parachute for Gladius 1. We will just add, we can combine both. We don't have to do it separately. This is almost like actually no, we're not going to call this Gladius 1. I'm changing my mind. I want this to be Little Jeb. And the reason is, of course, with, I think it was also the case with Mercury, but it was definitely also the case with Apollo, where they had the little Joe test rocket. It was a solid rocket to test the capsule, and this is literally what we're doing right now. It's the first test, so it seems appropriate. Little Jeb 1, but we don't have to add the 1. So we'll use the flea. Also, I will have names for our various rockets, because what I want to strongly strive towards is to use the sub-assemblies and use specific rocket families, again mirroring real world events, so we don't have to make a custom rocket for every single thing that we do. Now, of course, it's not necessary here because it's literally just one part and it already has a name, the flea, so this will just be as it is here. Now let's just add the parachute, of course. Like that. We can even make this all white just to fit the theme there. Check your staging, Scott Manley style, and just the thrust to weight ratio is too high. And I think see, now it takes a little while to update, but there we go. So 1.57 is just fine. And of course our first pilot will be Jebediah. Who else could possibly fill that role? Also, I can take out the monopropellant. This is not something I really pay attention to because it's such a small part of the rocket. The price, let's see if it changes. 2810, 2822, so it's 12 Kerbal bucks. It's hardly worth it, but we'll take it out. So let's launch, comrades, but this will not be from the main launch pad. We will pretend that the main launch pad complex is not quite ready yet, and we are doing experiments which is best done in the desert, so that's where we will start the early missions. So yes, we just wait a little for this and close that. We don't need that. So here we are, comrades, in the desert. This is our first launch site, and it kind of fits, I think, because this is what you would expect from conducting experiments with combustible dangerous materials. You want to keep that from your brand new expensive space center. So I think for this we do the basics. We need to gather science, so we'll observe the goo and we will get a crew report. Actually, for this I can open the science thing. I think, is that the thing I want? Yes, it should make a sound as well if there's something to gather, which is strange. It should be telling me that I need a crew report. Anyway, you record the crew's assessment and I can just get Jeb out to, you see that now it at least tells me an EVA report. Spacesuit was not necessary, just grab that. It's as if he's landed anyway, so I don't need to get him down to the ground level. Board. And now we just launch. 3, 2, 1. Our very first launch, and now at least I get information. We need to do another crew report, but it's impossible now because I should have taken the other one out. But we can do a mystery goo observation, and I do want us to turn slightly any direction really, just so we don't land back onto the pad. I think this is a nominal launch, don't you? Little Jeb is flying, and we can close this. Actually no, leave that. It should be good practice to leave this. Now with this type of craft I also like to launch or activate the parachute as soon as we reach our zenith, or our, it's not really an apoapse, but you can think of it like that. It is an apoapse, but I mean we're not leaving the atmosphere. The reason is just because this craft is very dangerous ultimately, because, just trigger that, it will flip over when you get down to the bottom of the atmosphere again because of its aerodynamic shape, and this is now empty in the back. it's doing exactly what it's doing here. You see, the lighter part is of course on the top then, and this arrow shape goes to the bottom. So all that you'll have is it will keep accelerating until it is too dangerous to open the parachute, and then it will rip off or it will not activate, and then you'll slam into the ground at full speed. So this is why it's important to pay attention to activating that. We can accelerate this. You see, it's a new game when it tells you using physical warp is going to affect the stability of the vessel. And it should now flip back over. I think there is a mod that also takes you out of time warp just before you hit the ground, but I'm not going to add more mods. We'll just use the good old-fashioned way. And that is a nice landing. So I will get Jeb back out. He'll grab the data. Another EVA report, board, another crew report, take, and a successful first launch and mission. So more tea is called for. Right, so now we have 22.8 science earned. I could have had more if I had him take the crew report out. But anyway, so now we get to the research and development lab, and we have to start developing our technology. So in this case, we are obviously going to use the science that we unlocked to help our subcontractors, like well, that one was just found by the road, like this, probidobidine. So we give them the science to help them make a thermometer for some reason, and then of course we will also pay them to develop the parts specifically for us, and of course we still have to pay for the actual parts that we use as well. Now I can get one more. I think we'll take the obvious choice. It's always the best to take the one that maximizes your science and pay for that. We have 90,000 Kerbal bucks now. So they obviously started us off, I think it was 25,000, so that's all that the governments or administrations of the planet could muster for the space program. And then they said, make do on your own. So that's why we're doing the contracts. Right, next we have completed those. So now of course we get many different types of contracts. I'm going to tend not to take, just want to find an example of that one. This, I'm not going to tend to take this kind of contract that asks you to activate something at a certain altitude and speed. That's too tedious for the most part. But anyway, I've also heard or read, I think anyway, I'm not sure if it's correct, that the game will actually give you more missions of the type that you like to do the most. So maybe then that is perfectly fine. Orbit Kerbin is too far away. Escape the atmosphere is important. I think we can take this one. Let's see if we can take another one. I don't want to do the launch site yet. We're still going to launch from the desert. And the surveys are really for aircraft. Now this seems tempting because all I have to do is to have the parachute. But will we be going at that speed? Probably. I'll take this one. We'll try anyway. So this is our own R&D facility that gathered the funds to complete or offer this contract. So let's go into the VAB and do the next one. For this it will not be Little Jeb because we now want to escape the atmosphere, or at least begin working on research in the upper atmosphere. So for this I will call it Gladius 1. It's appropriate, I think, so we'll get rid of the flea. I have to say the flea is probably one of the least used parts in KSP, because most people just use it at the very beginning and never again. We don't need a heat shield yet. We don't know anything about the thermal dynamics of a craft on re-entry yet, so hopefully on this mission we'll learn about that, even though we're not re-entering. Then we have a decoupler. I like the idea also of, you know, the Kerbals kind of learning from each mission. So in the previous mission we learned that we needed a decoupler just to bring things down safely. Now actually I'll do a two-stage rocket, so we'll bring the flea back. And we don't have a science bay yet. No, we do, so I want that. I definitely like to have experiments inside an experiment bay. Now the only question with this is always the same. When you have the center of mass overlay, it tends to be too high up onto the craft, so it will tend to want to flip over. And it is obviously because the capsule weighs a lot more than the scientific service bay. But we'll add some experiments to that and see if we can fix this. Now, how many do we need? So we're going to be needing one for the upper atmosphere, hopefully, and one for wherever we land if it's not in the same place. So 2 will probably be enough. I'm attaching them to the bottom just again to pull the center of mass down, but I'll just move them a little up. I don't want them sticking out. And then of course the barometer. Now in this case I want more than 2, because we still have to do that. Four should be fine. Now unfortunately I don't have access to the action groups yet. I should have activated that in the settings, but anyway, it's fine. We'll just do that manually. Then batteries we don't have yet and we don't really need, so we'll just close that. I'm not going to transmit anything. And then decoupler with the flea. Now we can turn this off. It should, oh, I've already got one there. Anyway, but at least like this it should be a little bit more aerodynamically stable. But ideally I think we need to put the heat shield on. That will really pull the center of mass down. But like I said, I want us to experiment, or at least pretend like we're experimenting. So we will not do that yet. And we're only using solid rockets at this time. So liquid fuel is a little, or liquid engines are a little too advanced for us. Thrust to weight is definitely too high, just like the rent in New York. It's too damn high. And 181, we'll bring it down a little more. Whatever happened to that guy who was saying the rent is too damn high? Anyway, 1.59 is fine. I think we can even use 2 of these, possibly. Then we have another one down here, and I like the way the fairing actually closes that now. So we'll have another one, because the thrust to weight is still fine. Aerodynamics will be a real pain for this, I think. And then we will have the hammer, and that just has to be brought down a little. Alright, that'll do, comrades. So now we have a 3-stage rocket here. That's very simple and elementary, and just for the initial experiments. Now I think in this case we're really going to have to focus on the aerodynamics. Luckily, of course, I will use a pilot for this, and I think still using Jeb is a good idea, so we can lock our orientation, but ideally we should have fins on the bottom and on this intermediary stage, but I'll try it without the intermediary one. Right, there it is, a very first rocket. So Gladius 1, and I think everything is fine. I will save this. I can use the Kerbal engineering system, but it's not really necessary for this yet. And of course the thermometer. What am I doing? It's going to be a pain to activate this during the flight though. I really should have added the action groups. I'll do this on the top here. Close. Let's launch again in the desert. Okay, comrades, here we are back in the desert, and for some reason my phone just decided that I was speaking to it. Go away. Google somehow activated there. Anyway, so for this we'll just again try launching to the east. Werner von Kerman has this theory that we can use the rotation of the planet to add to our speed to actually help us make orbit eventually. So we'll try and test that out. Lock your SAS and first do the tests, don't forget that. I'll say aim camera onto this part just so it makes it easier. We don't have to do that again, we just need to look there. It's 89 kilopascals, that's less than Earth I think, but it's because we're, well, yes, 800 meters above sea level. It should be 101, so that makes sense then. Log the data, and the same for the temperature, which is in Kelvin, so I have no idea what that means, but I'm sure it's quite nice. And of course it's a very warm day in the desert, I imagine. And I really should keep that open, but I'll close it for now. 3, 2, 1. And first of all, crew report. Heat is rising from the sand, and we just need to do a, I can do it like this, thank goodness, so it saves me from right clicking on everything. We've done that. Just do a temperature scan. Oh, that's so much easier. And we just want to turn slightly to the 90. Of course the wings really prevent that now. No EVA reports are going to happen at this point. Right, now we have to be careful of flipping over. So the second stage is now active, and things seem quite nominal thus far. I have to be so careful turning over now. But we don't want to come down too fast. Flying high. Alright, I'll do that in just a moment. Right, if we're in the 20s, we can usually turn over without fearing flipping over. Right, so first of all, temperature scan, atmospheric pressure scan, doesn't say anything really. And of course the mystery goo observation, which is now getting cold, which tells us that the atmosphere is getting quite thin. Unfortunately I can't do the crew report. I can't EVA as well. And we ditch that. Of course I should have put parachutes on that, but it's not worth it for something as cheap as that. And we are leaving the atmosphere, comrades. We will be the first to leave the atmosphere, so Gladius 1 is a success, I think. Anyway, let's see, do we have enough? Yes, we should have enough experiment storage opportunities there. Just gonna open this. So yes, we will use the other mystery goo. We will not worry about using it on landing. And there we are, we're in space, comrades. World's first milestones. This is of course all the various records that we've broken. You see, it's so nice. It tells us now we're in the desert and all of that, so it'll be very good for when we can do EVAs and crew reports, so EVA reports. We have launched our first vessel. Very nominal. We couldn't have asked for more. Well, we could have, and we will at some point. We've achieved the goal of getting data. We have hauled the parachute in flight. I didn't even think about this one, but it happened anyway. And yes, this is going to be something we get all the time now. This just tells us that the stages were destroyed and we lost 600 Kerbal bucks, but that's no big deal. It's the more expensive engines that I'll be worried about. We've escaped the atmosphere. What's it like up there? We hope it's fun because you're coming back very soon. And now we can do the temperature scan. Pressure scan is 0, so now we know for the first time that it is truly a vacuum, really. The atmosphere does get thinner as you go higher. And we do the mystery goo, which is now clumped into a sphere, which tells us there's no gravity, or at least we don't feel the effects of it. And it's also brittle because it's frozen. I really do want a crew report, but again I can't step out to take the data out, so we'll have to do that next time. So that's it. We just have to turn towards the retrograde just to help us a little. The re-entry shouldn't be too sharp, but the problem is, again, if the craft flips over, I'll F5 just because it's better to be sure there. If it's not stable, it'll flip over and keep accelerating because, again, it's got a very aerodynamic shape on the top. Let's turn the SAS off and see what happens. Yes, it's going over. That's a pity. But yes, that is something that I've learned a long time ago with these early craft. You always have this kind of problem until you add the heat shield with full ablator. Then it does become heavy enough to keep it upright, for the most part anyway. So I'm just going to activate the parachute as soon as I am able. The thing is also, oh yes, there we learn now about the heating that we get. The compression heating, I believe, is the main contributing factor here to the heating that we're getting. I learned that from Scott Manley. And obviously we need this kind of blunt shape just to slow us down. If it was flipped over, it would just keep accelerating. And oops, I should not have messed with that. Now we can't get back around. This is not good. Come on, can I not use that yet? You see, we're too fast, too low. No! This is exactly what I feared. There, use it. Okay, at least luckily it flipped over late enough. And we'll have our first ocean landing as well. Now let's hope none of the experiments are destroyed. It's a nice slow landing. And Jeb is very happy. He becomes the first Kerbal in space. And in the ocean and in the desert, really. But anyway, as an astronaut or Kerbonaut. Right, so now we have the new situation splashed down. So he is stepping out, taking the data, doing a EVA report, going back, doing another crew report. And we can't do anything else because we've used those experiments already. So I'll just recover. And that was actually almost a disaster, but that's what's always important, to save. And I really don't want to do a career where I disable saving and reverting. That just seems too tedious again. Now we have a plethora of science. I don't know if that's the correct description of a lot of science, but it's a plethora, I'll say. What was that movie called? That The Three Amigos, I think. That's a very famous movie where they ask, I don't know if it was the villain who asked his sidekick, do you know what a plethora means? Something, I don't know, I'm just getting this flashback right now. But anyway, it's a plethora of science. And we do get 70% of the value back from the capsule. And comrades, I will leave it right here. I don't think we need to do too much more for our very first launches, and I think I also need to give my voice a little bit of a break here. But this is great fun, and I think this is going to be a nice career. Of course, keeping in mind that consistency is not always the strength of my channel, and of me in general, I suppose. It might be, on and off when we do these particular career episodes, but it will be in a playlist, so obviously it will develop over time. We've broken a land distance record and we splashed down in the ocean, so at least we get little bits of money and possibly a little bit of data as well. But now we have a nice amount of money to begin our more serious expeditions to orbit. So I'll see you then, comrades. Have a fantastic day and happy anniversary to KSP. Here's to another 8 years of happy memories and new adventures.